Start letting people in.
Nice.
Hello, everyone. As people are jumping in here, we're gonna go ahead and get started quickly on this because John has a lot of information for us. So we want to give him the maximum amount of time that we can to share his message. So thank you guys for jumping on this call. This is RVWA's summer series. And today, as you can see on the screen, we're talking about no fear negotiation. And John Tangatella is the president of RV Designer and of Humble Confidence. He is passionately dedicated to helping women flourish in business, one negotiation at a time. He and his partner, Nicole Martin, co-authored No Fear Negotiation for Women in 2019. I highly recommend it. It's a great book, short read, perfect for by the pool. They created it as a simple and effective, repeatable tool for women to improve their lives. John is deeply invested in the RV industry. He owns two companies, RV Designer in Wheeling, Illinois, a supplier of aftermarket parts, and Humble Confidence, a training and speaking consultancy focused on negotiation and communication excellence. John's career has grown from customer-facing disciplines, both in the trenches and at the top, providing a unique perspective on what works in business and what does not. John was instrumental in building a single brand $5 million business into an $82 million multi-division best-in-class supplier. He has a strong sense for creative solutions with a keen focus on building relationships. John believes that while winning is important, the true goal of a successful negotiation is to achieve quote unquote, both grow outcomes that improve the bottom line and foster long-term relationships for both sides. John and Nicole's methodology helps women overcome their natural reluctance to negotiate in the first place. John and his wife, Elaine, formed a modern day Brady Bunch. They have a combined 7 children, 10 grandchildren, and 1 great grandchild. Primarily, as he says, through mergers and acquisitions. So I'm going to turn it over to John and just remind you all, we will do a Q&A towards the end of this call. You can always put your questions in the chat as we're talking with John, and we will ask those at the end as we have time. So John, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was a wonderful bio. I hope I can live up to all that. We're here today to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. It's helping women achieve their goals and certainly parity in the American economy. You know, we can't snap our fingers and undo 20,000 years of social programming and whatever. Just know this is not going to be about male bashing. That's not the whole idea here. What we want to get through to everyone is to implant several tools that will help you can use as a key takeaway for take-home value, utilizing this magnificent overall tool of negotiation. So let me dive in real quick. Why do we do this? Well, there's an imbalance in the U.S. economy. Here's women's compensation in the U.S. economy. If you use this as a measuring stick, starting from the 50s, things have improved over time, but certainly not up. On the left axis, where it says 90%, that's a percentage of women's compensation vis-a-vis the male dollar, so to speak. Today, in the decade of the 20s on the far right, we're hovering in the vicinity of 82 cents. It's been that way for a while, and it's been hovering. In my view, that's not good enough. And, you know, some people ask why I do this. I do it for several reasons. First of all, it's not right. Secondly, I have 6 magnificent granddaughters who are embracing the world, and I want them to go as far in their careers as their capability will take them and have nothing to do with the fact that they have an X or a Y chromosome. And I do believe the only way to approach this is, as Nicole and I put the book together a few years ago, is to attack it one negotiation at a time. So with that said, in my world, I believe everything is about human interaction. I had a breakthrough in my career about halfway through when I, as a highly confident guy, the C on the right stands for confident, the H on the left stands for humility. I was able to finally blend humility and confidence to change my approach to things. That balance really allowed me in my career to flourish. And it left an impression on me. And I realized that it's more about being present correctly and evolving to a place where it's not just the things I say, but the things I hear, and putting that together into a full approach. People say, oh, it's not business, it's personal. I think everything in life is personal, particularly business. We spend the majority of our life in our work, right, wrong, or indifferent. You probably spend at least 12 hours a day before you get up and get ready and get to work and blah, blah, blah. You probably spend 12 hours a day. There's only 24, and we're going to sleep a little bit of that. So that all said, human interaction is absolutely key. And that brought me to the idea of helping women utilize negotiation as a tool to get them to that better place. Here's the challenge for women. My observation, I am by no means stereotyping, but my observation on the pros and cons, the pros on the left side of the page, through a career of watching and working very closely with women, tremendous pros or tools that are great foundations for terrific negotiation. Strategic thinkers as a rule, multitask experts, organized approach, probably the most important thing of all in negotiation, the willingness to prepare. Now, again, this is one guy's observation, but I do believe those traits are real. In fact, my research brought me to two of the best women negotiation researchers in the world, Linda Babcock and Sarah Leshever of the University of Pittsburgh. They wrote a groundbreaking book years ago called Women Don't Ask. And there's the crux of the challenge. I believe, despite all the imbalance in the world that women had to absorb and work their way into, completely out of their control, perhaps the greatest thing we can overcome, and one of the biggest challenges, is every woman's natural desire to not do this and getting past that natural unwillingness. So what we try to do, what Nicole and I did when we wrote the book, was we tried to create a very simple but repeatable tool. We didn't go into great extreme detail of things that were going to complicate the message. In fact, we broke it down and painfully went towards simplicity. Getting back to the beginning, negotiation is a tool to improve, as you can see, I did a strike through business, through your life, because it's all connected. It's a tool to improve your life. And it's usually about managing relationships. If those are business relationships, there's where negotiation really comes to play. So what is it? Webster defines negotiate as a verb. It has multiple explanations, but the first one always resonated so much with me, and it surprised me. It says to discuss so as to agree. That's right out of the dictionary. To discuss so as to agree. Now here's the disconnect. In the back of people's minds, which keeps them from wanting to do it in the first place, is this expectation that the world is shoved down our throat that you're going to lose, or you're going to mess up, or I don't want to look bad, or I don't want to be embarrassed. But at the end of the day, negotiation should be about managing relationships. It's not a football game or a golf match where you're playing to win. I win, you lose. That's a sport. That's a competition. Negotiation should be part of the larger world of managing relationships. And I got to say, women in my life that I've surrounded myself with, particularly in my business here, are really, really good at that. Except they don't want to do negotiation unless prodded. They're not alone. 70% of people avoid it in the first place. And that's all genders, both genders. 70%, probably higher with women as a rule, which is pretty common. And I think that avoidance is always based on the specter of fear. Two major fears I've observed vis-a-vis women not wanting to do this as a rule. FOL, fear of losing. And then the big one, fear of making a mistake. Something I think deep inside of certainly the women I know and love about not making mistakes. You've seen this acronym before. Breaks down the most insidious F word in the English language, fear. False evidence appearing real. And it basically just means fear exists nowhere else but in our own heads created by ourselves. It's not to say we shouldn't be cautious. It's not to say we should be fearless or reckless. No, we need to drill the concept of fear out of the concept of negotiation in order to do it really well. And I'm going to give you an explanation later with an example of where the phrase no fear came from. I wasn't just making that up. Here's the good news, ladies. Number one, in a negotiation environment, you have more power than you think. You're stronger than you're giving yourself credit for right out of the chute. And secondly, usually there's both sides, us and them. Both sides have something the other side needs. Keep that in mind. I did a fair amount of research earlier in my career. I think the greatest groundbreaking work in this field was done in the 70s by Roger Fisher and William Ury in the groundbreaking book, Getting to Yes. Historically, up to that point, negotiation was always viewed as highly competitive, zero-sum game. I win, you lose. That's all that matters. And these guys came together and said, that's not how business should work. That's not how great businesses function. They observed how great businesses manage relationships with the four key people groups. That certainly drives me in my career: customers, employees, stockholders, and suppliers. All four of those, they felt, should be treated equally and with maximum respect. And what they emphasize in the book that we should always pursue in any negotiation is that we end up with a wise agreement, an efficient agreement, and that it improves the relationship. It's not zero-sum game. It's not I win, you lose. I win, you lose. The relationship is going the wrong way because nobody wants to lose and nobody will stay losing forever. And there's where a lot of angst comes in. But who's to say you can't have great long-term relationships where you constantly achieve these things? I try to run my business that way, and I know a lot of women on this call do the same thing. That's great negotiation. In their concept, it's about merits and interests, not positions. On a football field, my team tries to outposition your team by pushing you into your own end zone. In a real negotiation, we talk to each other and find out what matters. And what Fisher and Ury emphasized and what I bring to this program and what Nicole and I totally believe in, insist on, number one, using objective criteria, separate people from the problem or the issue, focus on interests, not positions. Interests as in, what do you need? What do I need? Not, let me beat you. And lastly, and I think very importantly, invent options for mutual gain. You'll notice I've bolded the verbs. I think the verbs here are key. It indicates action towards moving the relationship in a better direction. In our book, we break it out into 3 simple words, and we break the book out into different chapters focused on an M, a P, and an A. Obviously, first and foremost, it's gaining the willingness to do it in the first place. We go to great lengths to emphasize we're asking women in particular to have a change in mindset. Now, this isn't just that all women are against it. I can tell you earlier in my career, as confident as I was, I resisted doing this. I had a fear of losing, massive fear of losing. But once I crossed that line and I realized, wow, this wasn't so bad. And it worked out better than I thought. With each successive negotiation, it got better and easier to a point where I said, why don't I negotiate all the time? That doesn't mean being a jerk and pushing and changing things constantly. It means managing the relationship for continuous improvement. I think we all should run our business that way. The second letter, P, as in preparation, the single most important thing that you can do to have a successful negotiation happens before you get there. 90% of a successful negotiation, will you achieve those great things, is because you prepared well. Doesn't necessarily mean the other side prepared well. And in some cases, you have to prepare for them. So today I give the P a larger boldness on the screen here because we're going to focus on the area of preparation. We simply don't have enough time in a session like this to dive too deep. Nicole and I do a half-day actual workshop program for companies where we do break it down into deeper areas. But in this case, we're going to focus on preparation in just a minute and hopefully leave you with some good take-home value that will inspire you to really embrace this. And then the last letter of all, the thing that you have to do towards the end that makes it all happen is you got to ask. Those great authors, they wrote their book around the fact that historically women don't ask. They'll do all the work to get to the point, right to the edge of the cliff, but they won't jump. Not everybody's like that. But their point was, all the statistics indicate a natural unwillingness at that moment to actually do the ask. So I want to start with preparation. I want to spend a little time in this area. Hopefully we're going to get done at a point in time in the session where we can open it up and have some conversation. And I will also offer to everyone out there, I'm a board member of the RVWA. I'm quite visible in the industry. My number and my phone number and email are out there. Jessica can certainly share it with you. Anyone can call me at any time if you want to have a conversation about anything vis-a-vis negotiation. I'm more than willing to help as a friend in the industry. I think the best thing we can do, and what RVWA does so well, is pay it forward for the next generation. So that said, I love arrows. Arrows suggest to me movement. It suggests to me you're on a directional path. In a preparation session for negotiation, again, this is before you actually get to the point of a negotiation. And I'll probably focus on one aspect of negotiation, which is a seller-buyer environment. There's all kinds of environments. It could be employee, employer looking for, a better compensation package. It could be parents and children. It could be anything. But let's just focus for today on a seller and a buyer. And in my case, I always use the phrase widgets. I actually do sell widgets. I don't call them that, but that's a good way to look at it. And I'll touch on a few examples of how that works. First and foremost, sort of as Fisher and Ury suggested with objective criteria, you always start with data. If you'll notice, my first slide was a chart of women's compensation by decade. That's not by accident. I really believe when you start a conversation, you're in a relationship of any sort, or in this case, a negotiation where you're attempting to navigate through a challenge to get to a better place, you start with data. And it isn't just sharing numbers. It's starting with data to establish a knowledge base, a foundation, in fact. And there's a purpose to that. Negotiations tend to be extremely emotional experiences based on that first fear, FOL, fear of losing. We're not going to get rid of all the emotion, nor should completely get rid of it, but we have to manage them to a point where it doesn't drive the discussion. We start with data, and I'm going to get into that in just a little bit in a deeper level. As I'm going to focus on 3 of these a little deeper, again, in the interest of time. But moving down the arrow, the second one is confronting our emotions. Now, women have historically been incorrectly labeled as emotional beings by men in business as a way, I think, to disparage women from getting ahead. I think it's completely and totally wrong. We're all emotional beings, and there's not a darn thing wrong with that. But we confront our emotions because we have, in an emotional environment like a negotiation, our fears become larger because we have the specter of going backwards, and nobody wants to go backwards. In our workshop, we spend a little bit of time here, and this could take an enormous level of conversation. And I don't want to go there just yet, but it's part of the package. In our preparation, we're creating a foundation, in fact, with data and knowledge. We're recognizing, and it's an emotional issue, and we want to make sure we're going to manage ourselves correctly through that. Third one, this is crucial. We become the other side. We go through a process, and in our workshop, we utilize some activities where we actually try to get out of our own heads and go around the desk, theoretically, and become the other side looking back at our company and us. What do they say? What are our strengths and weaknesses? What do they need from us? Next one, invent options. Here's the key. I think this is the most important one on the screen. If you go into a negotiation, let's start with probably how this came about. You're a seller. Your customer came to you and said, we've been buying your black widgets that you've been selling us for the last 10 years. Everything's okay. You're a pretty good supplier. You ship on time. We haven't had any quality issues, blah, blah, blah. But my boss came to me last week. We're struggling. We got to improve our bottom line. And he said, we have to reduce costs. So I'm coming to you. I need an X% cost reduction. This happens all day, every day in all aspects of industry. It's probably happened to everybody on this call to some degree or another. We as the seller who are now being challenged to do something we don't want to do because we have a ton of reasons why that's not a good idea to reduce our price. We need to invent options to get us off of a focus on price. Doesn't mean price doesn't matter. And we all live in an industry where we try to deliver an affordable vacation to the American family vis-a-vis an RV. We understand that it is a very, very competitive environment, but the area of inventing options takes the discussion to a better place. Get into that in just a minute, a little bit more. Then what we do, once we've done all this in our preparation, we come up with our offers. And notice I said offers as in plural. It's not one thing. So I'm being challenged to reduce the price on my black widget. But if I've invented options, I need to come up with ways to go back to my customer with multiple options here. When I say bracketize, that's very, very important. In the emotion of a negotiation and in the moment of truth, most of us want to just get done and go home. We have a tendency to drop down. The idea of bracketizing is you have your best option, which is usually the highest price. You have the expected or normal option, which is somewhere in between. And then you have a bit of a fallback position that you allow yourself to go to. It's not far, but it's something. And then you put brackets around those three options, and you do not leave your brackets. That's the whole idea here, is we're not going to allow all this preparation to get thrown out the window at the last minute. And then the last thing is we create an agenda and then we practice with friends and or family members. I've made over 5,000 sales calls in my career, and in almost every case, I bring an agenda with me for a single purpose. Number one, it helps frame the discussion. And number two, provides me with subtle control of the discussion. If I lay out an agenda and hit the key points, it's not to say that's exactly what we're going to do. And in almost all cases, when I hand those out, someone says, oh, geez, thanks for doing that. I meant to do it, but I've been so busy. Oh, great. I'm glad you did this. You're now managing the meeting. And if you go back to the first one, starting with data and ending with an agenda in your preparation, you are managing this discussion. And that's absolutely crucial for successful negotiation from your standpoint. So let's dive a little deeper into a few of these things. First one, start with data. Everybody says, well, what do you mean by that? You're the seller. Bring some sales figures. Show history. Show where you've been. Show what they've bought. Show that for the last 5 to 10 years, you have been an unbelievably reliable supplier. And their business and your business has grown because you've had a healthy relationship. Notice what you're doing. You're drilling out some of the emotion here, and you're reminding people of stuff they may have already forgotten. You bring all that with you. And if you belong to an association like we all do, and there's some overall market information, bring that too. Hey, we're in a strong market. Oh, hey, the market's downturn. Hey, the market has historically put us in this position. Sharing and showing that information puts you in the driver's seat in the discussion. And it's based on a foundation in fact, because it's all true. It's got to be true. We're not making stuff up here. It's got to be true. And you now are in the leadership role of the conversation. The third one I mentioned, become the other side. Those eyeballs bouncing back and forth. That means you're taking the time to see it through their eyes. You're seeing you through their eyes of your strengths and weaknesses. You're interrogating yourself and pretending you're them And in so doing, you're learning so much about yourself. You're preparing or planning for pressure because you want no surprises in the negotiation. You expect that there's going to be things you're not maybe that were not visible on the surface. There's going to be some pressure. Hey, if you don't cut your price on this, I got so and so over there. They're more than happy to do that. And that's about putting you in a place you don't necessarily want to be. And then you prepare for these things called backups, where they intentionally throw things at you to get you off your game, or diverters that move the conversation in a different direction because they may want to steal back the leadership of this conversation. Again, in our workshop, we go through a great effort of an activity called Through the Eyes of the Other Side. This is an absolutely crucial thing to do. You don't have to go to great lengths here, but you need to become them for a period of time during the preparation phase. I mentioned the backups and the diverters, the act of intentionally placing an obstacle to get you off your game, and the diverter, the act of intentionally diverting the discussion so as to buy time and divert your attention. And this is what you do in preparation. And this is what you do and become the other side. Whoops, I lost my screen. There we go. You become them. You hope that you don't have to do these things, but you plan for the pressure by understanding that it is competitive. And while we want a healthy collaborative relationship, it isn't always that all the time. We hope it's that most of the time, but it isn't always that. Number 4, probably my favorite, creative. Talk to people in your business. Share the challenge and say, how do we turn this into a positive? One of the greatest things you can do in business is to take every single challenge and look at it as an opportunity. And I know that's kind of, green sky green light thinking, blue sky thinking, but it's true. Invent options by linking the dots for both sides. You provide alternatives to their demands. Perfect example. I'm the seller. They've been buying my black widgets for 10 years. It's going good. I showed them all the information. They're doing great. We really appreciate the business. But my company's in the widget business. We also make purple, green, and pink widgets. But they don't buy those from us. They buy them from that guy down the street. And we've heard he's not such a great supplier. He probably got the same phone call. Well, here's an opportunity. So instead of just dropping my black widget price, which is what they want, how about we help each other? We go back to Fisher and Urey, indicating interests and merits, and basically say, sure would love those purple, can't remember the color, purple, white, and pink widgets. We do that. I can increase my volume. I can get a better rate on my end with my material suppliers. I can become that much more efficient. We've then taken the relationship from here to there. And now all of a sudden, we can help each other. I don't know that I can get you all what you're looking for on the reduced price, but I might could do a little something, but you're doing something for me. We're expanding the relationship and taking it to, because I'm a darn good supplier in the first place. Why wouldn't we do that? I think the key here is never assume the deal is finite. When someone calls and says, drop your price, they want you to think of nothing but dropping that price. When we invent options, we open our minds because the deal is never finite. In our workshop, we have an activity here called free givebacks. And this is something you can do tomorrow. Get out a single piece of paper. I want everyone on this call to write down all the great things you and your company do for your customers that you don't charge for. Seriously. Maybe you do some engineering work or some design work. Maybe you do certain things when it comes to terms, which I'm going to get into in just a sec. But there's tons of things you probably do as a premium supplier that you don't charge for. Write those down, make it part of your invent options opportunities. I call this the wheel of terms, something I put together. It's got 8 little boxes on it. Top right is the price, All negotiations almost always start there, but there's a lot more to a relationship than that. Does payment terms out? Does advertising support, warranty, commitment, ordering threshold, freight allowance of service delivery guarantees, payment terms in? Just stuff I thought of on the fly. It's probably 100 more. When you get that piece of paper out tomorrow and write down the free give backs, the great things you do, flip it over and make a circle. Start making your own will of terms to emphasize there's more to this than a price. I'm going to divert here for a second. I'm going to talk about an insidious thing that happened that was part of my desire in my career to help women. I had a breakthrough earlier in my career. I think I mentioned I became a better person and certainly a better business person when I interspersed humility with confidence and changed my approach. I became a better listener. It really helped me in all ways, and I'm very thankful for that. And as my career went, I was doing quite well. I hired an OEM sales manager in a different industry to replace some work that I had been doing. She happened to be a lovely woman. Her name is Amy. She's actually a good friend today. But back in the day, this is 35 years ago, she came in to replace what I was doing. Well, we had a very large customer in the marine market. We had a very large customer who built a lot of boats, and they were extremely aggressive. And it was a bunch of high testosterone guys, and pardon my French, who could really be assholes when they wanted to be. And guys like me would go in there, and I had already made my breakthrough. I enjoyed negotiation. I'm a competitive guy, so I'd go in and we duke it out, and normally it all worked out for everyone. You had a few scars on you, but you got through it, and it was good. Well, this club, they actually called themselves that, and they had a sign over their conference room with that name on it, and their logo was that piranha up top. It was insidious as hell, and I hated it. Well, any of it, what really made it insidious was my new sales manager, Amy, clearly a female, needed to get up there in the near future at that time because we were going through some tough material impacts. We sold metal products, and all kinds of things were happening with brass and bronze and whatever. But be that as it may, we needed to get a price increase out of them, and this was a very, very difficult thing to do. You went in knowing it was going to be ugly. So all that said, this club had a really nasty edge to it. They not only beat up the guys, they prided themselves on getting a female sales manager to come in and seeing if they could make her cry. Now, I know by today's standards, that's awful, but unfortunately, stuff like that happened back in the day. But anyway, Amy knew this, and I knew it. And she needed to get up there to do her job. And she said, I'm going and I can do this on my own, but I need your help to prepare. And I said, well, that's really good because you have to prepare. And there's no way I want you walking in there and not being successful. And God knows, I know you're not going to cry. So we spent the next 2 weeks really training. I was the customer, that she'd be the customer, and we'd go back and forth. We'd role play. We threw everything at each other that a customer could possibly throw at each other. And that arrow, the six stages of that arrow, was essentially born in my head at that point. And we sent her up there in an incredibly powerful position. And we trained hard. We really did. One time I had her get in her car, drive around the block, and pretend she was coming in to make a sales call on me. And I made her wait in the lobby for an hour. Oh God, was she mad. But she was ready for anything. She got up there, she kicked ass and took names. She got everything we needed. When she left, they clapped. They said, you're the first one who didn't cry. We didn't have cell phones then, so she rushed to a gas station and called me, and we high-fived each other over the phone. It's a weird story, but it's a true story. That did something to me. I realized the imbalance with women in the marketplace is wrong. And that day, the idea of no fear was born. It doesn't mean to be fearless or reckless. It means drill out the fear so you do what you need to do. And Amy did it. She embraced the preparation. She was going to be good at it anyway, but that day she was spectacular. And she used that through the rest of her career. She had an unbelievably successful sales career in several different industries. Let's talk a little bit about tactics. I have 6 of them. I'm only going to show 3. Tactic number one, when the stuff comes up, do not be rushed. You own the timing. You manage the timeline. Someone's going to say, hey, I need a price reduction. I need it in 24 hours. And you got to come back and say, I can't give it to you in 24 hours. That's an unreasonable request. Push back. I need a little bit of time. Talk to my engineering team. We got to figure out what's going on. Let me do my homework. You'll get a much better result if I have some time. Don't be rushed. It's a tactic to get you off your game. Another one, always bring stuff. Always. All about you. I'm in the widget business. It doesn't matter what business you're in, doesn't matter what you sell, whether it's products or service. Never go in empty-handed, ever. You see, humans understand 3 different ways. Some humans are visual learners. Some humans are auditory learners. Some humans are kinetic learners, as in touch. Bring stuff, show stuff. Take the attention off of yourself onto whatever it is you're selling. Break it up. And you know what? There's a compliment to the customer when you do that. You took the time to create an agenda and to bring some stuff with you. I want to talk a little bit about a philosophy of mine, and then maybe open it up for some conversations. In our book, chapter 2 is a section called Martini Glass Thinking. It's not necessarily completely negotiation oriented, but it speaks to how I believe all of us should approach business. Using the shape of a martini glass, which is clearly very broad at the top and narrows down radically towards the bottom, attack every issue with a strategic perspective in mind, first, up by the olives. It must be consistent with the vision of your company and the vision of your initiatives. Then it breaks down to objectives. How are we going to operationalize that vision? And then the strategies we're going to implement to do the doing. And then, of course, we get into action plans. Don't start at the action plans and work your way up. Always start at the top of the glass and work your way down. It speaks to intentionality. When I put this program together, I had this concept in mind, and I said the overall vision is to help women get to, at minimum, 100% on a male dollar in the U.S. economy. I can't do that alone, but I can help women achieve that one negotiation at a time. I do that because I have 6 magnificent granddaughters that I want to go as far in their careers as their capability will take them. And hopefully it'll have nothing to do with the fact that they have an X chromosome versus a Y chromosome, strictly based on capability and effort and results. So I'll stop right there. And we've talked for roughly 35 minutes, or I've talked for 35 minutes. And I'd love to open it up right now to some conversation. Everyone on this call is probably challenged with negotiation challenges all the time in all aspects of life. If there's nothing you take from today, please take the following. Number 1, you have more power than you think. Number 2, utilize my arrow of preparation. You don't have to do exactly my arrow, but put an enormous amount of effort in the preparation phase. That's what will gain you the success. Now, the other day, Jessica and I were talking, and we were chatting about some of the stuff in this, and Jessica did ask the question. I'm going to preempt you here, Jessica. She did ask the question, all right, how do you drill the emotion out, and how do you focus on all this to get to cross that line? And I admittedly says it's not easy for the first time. The best way is to remind yourself that you and your company always have something the other side needs. And the way to drill out the reluctance that comes from fear and emotion is look at that arrow, dive into preparation. I'm surrounded by women in my business, and they are the greatest preparers in the world. That's why we get things done. Good stuff doesn't just fall out of the sky. It happens because people prepare and work hard to get it done. If you embrace preparation, you instinctively fortify your confidence level, and you give yourself the opportunity to cross that line and do it. And once you do it once or twice, you'll embrace it and you'll love it. I assure you of that. So, Jessica, I'll stop for a while if you want to dive in.
Yes. So we do have a question in the chat, John, that says, do any of these ideas change if you're trying to sell yourself for a new position or career? Or a change in job duties?
I think perhaps the person's talking about maybe a different job within the same company where, you know, you're moving up within around with people, you know, and all that. I think the basic concept is always the same because we're always dealing with people. And if people are making decisions, and I certainly believe in this case they will, yeah, the widget aspect and seller buyer is what I choose because it's, you know, it's close to home for me. But the same basic concept applies in all cases. We're managing relationships. And if you're pursuing a new job or a new role, there's a promotion opens up and you want that promotion. The same basic format applies. Start with data, manage your emotions, get in the heads of whoever it is, that person who's going to do the interviewing and the decision making. Instead of a customer, it's a fellow employee. And walk in with options. Don't walk in, just say, hey, I'm here. Or don't, I always tell people looking for jobs, don't just show up with your resume. Bring examples of things you did. I'll give you an example. Early in my career, I started out, I was advertising and marketing manager for a company. And I was pursuing a new job in a slightly different industry. And I had over the course of several years, done a lot of collateral work. We did some TV work and a few radio spots and stuff like that. And I went to the interview. There was 5 people interviewing that day. I was the 5th of 5, and I walked in, and the guys were kind of tired. I could tell that it had been a long, drawn out day, and immediately pulled out a binder of this is back in the day when you put stuff in binders. I pulled out a binder of stuff I had worked on, and their eyes lit up, and they looked at me and go, "Wow, this is kind of cool stuff." And I go, "Well, yeah, it's a marketing position. That's your marketing support position you're interviewing for." And my future boss said to me, he goes, "You're the first guy who showed up today with anything." I go, "You gotta be kidding me. This is what you do in this job." I can't imagine somebody wouldn't bring all the good stuff. You'd be surprised what happens when you bring examples. So answer the question. You're managing relationships. The process is essentially symmetrical as what I mentioned, and always bring those tools with you so you can invent options.
Awesome. Thank you. So let me ask this question. When it comes to role playing and things like that, I think as women sometimes, and anybody can jump in here, but sometimes as women, we will overanalyze that. And I think you kind of alluded to that a little bit. We'll overanalyze. And is there a way that maybe we are at a point that we need to stop overanalyzing all the possible scenarios that could happen and just focus on a couple? Or do we need to really look at all the possible scenarios?
I think the best way now I'm answering that as a guy, okay? But the best way, I believe, if you're pursuing new business, or you're in a tough negotiation on a price, or you're pursuing that promotion we just talked about, I do believe as part of preparation, you need to interrogate the ups and downs. There's a natural inclination on the part of certainly the women in my life to overthink most things. My wife and I talk about this all the time. I'm not sure she's crazy about the conversation, but at some point you can talk yourself out of anything. There's a line you cross because we're natural beings. Our main job and our brains are and Tracy alluded to this last month, and our brains are kind of programmed to protect us so that we survive. And the biggest fear to survival is something's going to get us. And we're always listening to things that could get us. And sometimes it's a long list and we can overdo that. So my answer to you is do the preparation program and focus on the positives and prepare yourself to 90 or not, I would say 90%. You can't, if you overthink it, you're going to put yourself in a bad place. Focus on the positives of you could become the other side, you're seeing you through them, but really dive into the when you invent options and you're in the positive zone now, hey, this is what we could do. What if we did this? And in invent options, it all starts with the question, what if? What if? What if you bought my purple widgets? What if, looking for that new job, we added some resources over here that's going to allow us to shrink our cycle time? Whatever that might be, the what ifs are crucial.
We have another question in the chat, and I think your what if scenarios really play into it. It says, any advice for a new graduate with no experience, but 3 degrees to leverage? I kind of feel like your what if scenario, if you don't have the preparation or whatever to say, this is what I've done, looking for a career, you could definitely play the what if scenario. What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree with what you just teed up there, Jessica. A couple things in today's economy. It's been, you think of the last few years, it's really hard to hire people, especially hiring really, really good people. We don't have to go through all the whys and wherefores of how COVID threw everything out of whack, except today, you as a new person coming in have a little more power than maybe your peers of 20 years ago, in that you're new, you're fresh, you don't have to unlearn things. And I would emphasize going in, you always bring props. Now you'll say, well, wait a minute, I haven't had any jobs. Well, you went to college, you got 3 degrees. I'm sure you did some things in college. Maybe you were in a language group, or maybe you were an athlete, or maybe you were in a debate club. And you emphasize, look, I realize this was college, it's not your company, but I want you to know this is something I'm so proud of. I love to share it with you. It shows them who you are. It shows them that you're a person who takes initiative. It shows them that you stepped out of the box, because most likely they're going to be interviewing 5 or 10 other people who just got out of college. Now, all of a sudden, you're the one who stands out. And it's a way of inventing options when in fact you don't have the experience in the business world to show real business options. You're giving them who you are.
Okay, next question. It says, hi, John, it's Elizabeth. So clearly, you know this person. She's
Yes.
still struggling to sell her business, security service, and women's workplace safety training to potential clients. Still finding that they are experiencing loss instead of proactive plan to avoid it. Struggling to bring value to the table since it is not tangible. So there's not really a question there, but I'm thinking her question is more along the lines of maybe help her with the wheel. What are some of the other things of value that she could bring?
Yeah, the reason she said, hi, John, it's Elizabeth, her and I are in a program together, and it's great. So I have a little bit more knowledge of this. My emphasis to Elizabeth is you're selling something that is difficult to codify, and it's difficult for the person on the other side to truly visualize. You're selling security, because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to avoid, you're selling the avoidance of problems. And if somebody's sitting there saying, I'll have it right now, how do I value all that? I think the best way to do that is you find some parallel industry or company that has bought the service and gives you the opportunity with a testimonial or some examples of how this security system has worked for them. For example, go find someone in maybe in a related industry and interview them and say, hey, we got into the security world, and as a result, we reduced our problems by X%. We used to have all kinds of theft and stuff walking out the back door. That has completely been eliminated. And we now are, our employees feel much safer on the job, and we have reduced our turnover rate by X%. Find a way to model the good things that your service will bring, even if you have to go outside of your industry to find it, and deliver that back to a potential customer. I do sympathize with Elizabeth. She's selling a service that is very difficult for potential customers to put their arms around, or existing customers to put their arms around. You have to find a way to make it real. And I think you can do that by modeling other people and other companies.
So let me ask this. So I'm curious, just with her background. So immediately the thing that pops in my head is we were just talking to Susan, right? And she was talking about how she's working extra hours this week so she could take a couple of days off. And I'm reminded of a story. I was young, and my mom would do the same thing. She would try to go into work early and get more done and all that kind of stuff. And where she worked, it was in a not a great part of town. And a woman was actually doing the same thing, going into work in her same building, and was actually assaulted and, beaten and robbed and all of that, simply because she drove a nice car, And so I think, Elizabeth, like to her stuff, those stories, like
Mhm.
You know, you walk into, I'm thinking of like these little boutiques that pop up all the place, and they have all these college age women that are working there. How do you help them stay safe? Because of everything that's going on in the news, that now certain cities, you know, people can come in and as long as they take less than $1,000, they don't get in trouble.
Mhm.
Those are the kind of things, like, I look at the story side of it. Do you ever
Mhm.
see that with negotiation, John? Like, can you bring in stories when you don't have really all that much to play on?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's such a great question and semi-answer, Jessica. You sort of answered your own question. I think we're all motivated by stories because it goes back to the beginning. This is all about human interactions and managing relationships. And when you can bring up a story that is parallel to the person and issue that you're dealing with, it's completely and totally true. I'll give a story. It's not certainly as compelling as this poor woman who was assaulted, but we used to sell electrical products, and our electrical products went on boats, and they installed significantly easier. And we spent time out on the assembly line observing the installers installing our competitors, and then we gave them some of ours, and we did some time studies for them. We were allowed to do this. We weren't cheating or anything, but we were able to do that. And this is before videos. We actually videoed and timed the effort. And we came in with the story that one of the installers said, I was able to install this thing in 1/3 the time of the other. And it because of certain things they did, it made it simpler, easier, and I am so much more confident it's going to work. Last month, you guys were coming back to us installers because stuff got down the line that wasn't right, and we had to we had to push things back, and you hate that. We use their own stories for our benefit. Finding ways to bring those into the discussion is absolutely crucial. And that was a wonderful tee up for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. I think that when you're gathering your data for women, there's so much benefit to understanding, you know, maybe you only deal with person A, that's the purchaser or whatever, but every once in a while you hear from a customer service rep or something like that, understanding their pain points and then being able to take that to the purchaser and say, hey, I was able to help your customer service person with this, this, and this, and this, and here's the data that backed it up. I think that that's huge. Okay, one other question that I have for you is there a balance in speaking in a negotiation? Can you speak too much? Is there power in the silence? Because I think that there's some data out there that says, hey, there's power in not talking. So what are your thoughts on that? Is there a balance there?
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, that's segment 4 of our workshop. It's called In the Room. We didn't go there today. Today we focused on segment 2, which was preparation. But in the room, the first thing we suggest is we walk in and we don't dive right in. We get the lay of the land, and we ask a few probing questions. Hey, we set this thing up. You want us to review. We're ready to discuss it. Before I go any further, tell me where you're at. And then you get silent, and that you're trying to pull from them what might have happened since the last time you talked. And one of the things in that, which is we call it the path to ask, is a thing called the pre-cap. You've asked them to give you some stuff, and then instead of a recap, we call it a pre-cap. You're recapping before you get to it. You kind of bring everybody back to square one, but you do this before you dive in, because they're expecting you to come in there roaring. And you bring stuff in, you put your stuff on the table, and then you get comfortable and ask them to, hey, where are you in all this? And you allow them to tell you where they're at. You also allow the room to get comfortable.
Nice. Well, anybody else have any other questions? Feel free to pipe up or type them in the chat there. But John, this has been awesome. I think it's great reminders for all of us, just no matter, I mean, if any of you were on the DISC workshop that we did back in April, you know, high Ds, this may come a little bit easier, but somebody that's a high S, it may not be that easy. Somebody asked, what's the name of your book? It is No Fear Negotiation for Women, correct?
Yes, it is.
And I'm pretty
And-
sure you can get it anywhere.
No, not necessarily, but RVWA has a promo code, and it's promo code RVWA. What I can do is I can get you some information, Jessica, and then I think you know who's on the call. You can maybe blast it out to everybody, and more than happy we can, more than happy to do this. The other thing I want to mention is I'm in the industry. I know a fair amount of you, and I am more than happy anytime to have a conversation. And if you want to, talk about a private issue with a customer or an employee or whatever, more than happy to devote some time to help you out.
Awesome. And John's email for everybody is in the chat. It's the very first one, which is just johnt@rvdesigner.com. And last thing I will say is a couple of RVWA updates. So symposium tickets are still open. Education Symposium is October 11th through the 13th in Chicago. We have finalized 2 and almost 3 of the workshops. And then we have a 4th, really like a surprise for everybody that I think is going to be amazing conversations that you are not going to want to miss. So if you've not gotten your tickets for the symposium, please join us in Chicago in October. It's going to be a great time. The other thing, our next discussion is on July 27th. It is about leadership. So join us here again, noon on the 4th Thursday of July, which is the 27th, to talk about leadership. Our awards that we do at the Education Symposium are still open until July 31st. So you can get all that information on our website, rvwa.org, and nominate somebody. We've got some great nominations so far, but we would love to have more. If you are in Elkhart, we are doing a happy hour on the 12th of July. So 2 weeks from now, it is going to be at High Note Rooftop Bar, which is downtown Elkhart. So if you are interested, I think we've got 60 or 70 people so far signed up. It is the entire rooftop. So we will be indoor, outdoor, regardless of the weather. So please join us for that. And next thing to keep on your radar is open house breakfast. That will be on Tuesday, the 26th. We are inside this year, which is amazing. We are so excited to be inside and not have to deal with any of the weather. So we are going to be inside the Hall of Fame this year. So please keep that on your radar. It will be the Tuesday of open house week, which is the 26th. So if you all need anything else from me, you know where to find me, jwriter@rvwa.org. And we appreciate all of you coming today and participating in the conversation.
Jessica, one last quick thing. I'm just looking at some of the chats. It's moving quick, and I can't get to all of it on the screen. If somebody wants to chat, I think some people have said they'd like to have a conversation. You have my number, you have my email. Give me a ring, reach out. I may not have been able to get the stuff off the screen fast enough.
Yep. Yeah, definitely just reach out to John. Like I said, johnt@rvdesigner.com, and shoot him a message and talk more. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks, John. Nice job.
Take care. See ya.